What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Learning Culture Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Barry, and this is a show about building cultures of learning inside companies. Joining me today is Eric Grant. Eric leads learning and content in product support at Figma, and he's one of the rare data people who can really tell a story. Before Figma, he built L&D teams at some of the most data-driven companies in the world. Think LinkedIn, Coinbase, Uber, and The Trade Desk. And he brings a Georgia Tech MS in data science into a field that usually runs on more vibes than variables. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when you bring that kind of analytical rigor to learning, how you can actually measure where the training works and where the numbers fall short, and how to design programs that change performance, not just complete courses. We get really practical and really specific. And as I say in this episode, grab a transcript of this and chuck it in your favorite LLM and ask for a playbook, because Eric shares exactly that. If you're struggling to prove ROI and are looking for some guidance, this episode is for you. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Eric Grant. Eric, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Andrew. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this one's been a while coming. You and I talked about this last year, and then we had multiple reschedules. But here we are now at the beginning of March, diving into a topic that has been dominating my feed on LinkedIn, the topic of measurement in L&D, and how do we go about that? You framed this really nicely in our emails before this. You said, I asked you what the central question you'd like this to talk about. And you said, if measuring learning is both necessary and nearly impossible, what are we supposed to do?
Oh man, I will try to offer a few things we can do, but I think holding that question and understanding that is like probably the first step. It is really, really hard. I think we need to know that, say that, understand that, know why that's the case. And when we can measure or try to measure, just make sure we're doing it as rigorously, but as openly about the imperfections of it as possible, right? Like any measurement of human anything is really difficult. This is why studies on our health are difficult and medicine is difficult, and all these things of which we're looking at how this affects human beings is so hard. Like our performance and way of being is so affected by everything else happening around us, our mood, our gut, our sleep, all these things. And so anytime you want to measure a human being, you can't isolate one thing and say this thing is doing all of the work. There's all these compounding factors. So understanding that, but excited to chat about what we can do given all that, and where I think efforts should be applied.
Yeah. And so you said on the Big Think podcast that you did that job performance is not just a skills thing. I think that's kind of what you're driving at here. It's like a confidence thing. There's an emotional aspect to it. We're trying to capture an essence that can't really be captured.
Yeah.
Right. So we're creating proxies and we're trying to measure it as best we can. And you also said on the same show, and I think I want to start here. You said that training only succeeds when its perceived value exceeds work's immediate value. So in other words, does 30 minutes to go to this training justify me not working on my to-do list for the next 30 minutes?
Yep.
So I really like that framing. How do you think about this now in your current role before we go back to some of the previous projects you've done?
Yeah. So I set this up for teams, both how you said it and then really just as an equation for the math-minded folks, which is, one side is perceived value of learning. What am I going to get from this training, this 30 minutes, this hour, this 2 hours? That's one side. And then there's the, perceived value but usually we can kind of know the actual value of work. And then there's a greater than or less than sign, right? So it's sort of this thing, right? And work is always going to kind of have this urgency to it. And I think one of the reasons that we sometimes fail to draw the attention of learning is that people's perceived value of, oh, all right, well, this is just another training. I've done it before. I don't think it's going to be that good. I don't think it will deliver. The work that I have to get done today is going to take precedent, right? That changes when you start to like add really amazing elements to the training and you get an amazing guest speaker and these things where you could see like, oh, people attend that thing because their perceived value is so high of what they're going to get. How do I tackle that? Marketing, right? I think one of the great reveals to me in my time in learning is that you have to market what you're doing and you have to market it well and you have to think like a marketer. You have to think of, top of funnel and the touch points you have through with people that, yes, if you put good learning out, hopefully word will spread and do these things, but that can take some time and everybody's perception of what they're getting from that changes. And so you have to market that to that perception of value, not just we're going to run an AI training. We're going to run this AI training so that you can do this, which will make you this much more productive, which will then help all of the remaining hours of work you have today, this week, forever, and make you more productive and sort of do it that way. Right. And like every day I feel that we are part of that war of attention within companies, within people. This is Netflix's actual rival is YouTube because people are spending all their time on YouTube, and YouTube's greatest rival is TikTok because people are spending their time. Like people's attention is getting so drawn into these places that the idea of like, hey, come in for this hour training that someone's going to talk at you for or talk at you for some and you're going to do is like, people are like, I don't even have the energy or attention for that. And so again, you have to market directly to here's what you're going to get if you can give me some of your attention and do this learning. So marketing is one. And in that marketing too, it's really telling that story. Like I had a conversation the other day about this idea of learning effort, right? And it's like good learning requires a lot of effort. And you're having to ask people that are tired and bogged down and feeling busier than ever to put in effort to learn. And sometimes they just don't want to. And again, the reason like the TikToks and the YouTube shorts of the world succeed is they take no effort to absorb, right? And you're asking for that. So how are you marketing the value of what they get, the outcome to them of, if you give me attention, time, effort, I can give you this thing, new skill, new tactic, new tool. The tool can do this for you. And again, compound on that.
I couldn't agree more. Marketing the benefits of a program and how that drives innovation or motivation for the learner, because that's key, right? They've got to want to be there in the first place or want to take the training. As a follow-up to this, how do you think about like giving people, like helping them see the direct impact on their work and to the point of actually like, hey, bring work to the training and we'll actually like move stuff forward together. Do you think through that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think the relevancy point is key, right? And like any, hands-on thing you do that's less theoretical, hypothetical of like, come in with this exact thing, right? And I think one thing I'm really getting into is like, people now have done lots of different skill trainings over the years and soft skills, this idea, and like really marketing that, like, what does that look like this year, right? What does that look like with AI? What does it look like in this company? And promising that something will be different, but hyper relevant to them as part of those groups of, I'm in this year, I'm this job role, I'm at this company, right? But it's really like, please bring this in. And like, you may have heard me say this before, but it talk a lot about when we talk about measurement, we get into this, talk about survey design, like, the question I come back to that I try to ask and urge everybody to ask is really simple, which is, do you think this made you better at your job? Right. And it's like, whether you liked it, thought it was too effortful, slide was wrong. Like, if I can just market simply, you will be better at your job, which is as universal of an outcome, I think, as people want, and I can really dream up, then they see like, okay, this is about my role, my thing, the thing that I do every day. And you get some relevancy points there, and then, talk about, okay, what about your job made this helpful or not helpful? So yeah, try to bring that in for sure.
Zooming out a bit, you're a big baseball fan, huge Cubs fan. And baseball is a very measurement driven sport. I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, but I'm curious what you have learned about baseball's ability to create a profile of a player that matches what you feel, in real life, like about a player.
Oh man, what an interesting question. I I love that question. I don't know if I've ever thought about it like that, but baseball really scratches the 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 both hemispheres of my brain for me. Like there is an insane um, statistical element to it, and the way they measure, and sabermetrics has even changed that in the last 20, 30, 50 years. But there's such an art to it, and there's clearly things that don't show up on a stat sheet, players that do things, effort players. You talk about clubhouse players that have these immeasurable parts to them. And so it really feels like both art and science, or stories and science, that for me, like I came from the story world and kind of taught myself the science part along the way, but it really does that. Um, I very much think, and I've talked a little bit about this too, that we're headed there in a workplace. Like from this point forward, you will never be less measured at your workplace than you are today. And the telemetry, or I always miss how to say that word, the telemetric tools that are starting to come out that are going to measure all these ping pongs between how you're working on something and the interaction of different tools and feed it back to central databases now is going to make you be very measured. And so you will have these like scorecard elements to the way you work. This is how much you access this tool, or did this thing, or the length of your things, or these reads on different data points, structured or unstructured. And you'll have this art of the way that you make people feel, the creativity, the energy you bring to a room, the leadership kind of, potential you have that people are reading in. And so you kind of are going to fit that too. But baseball is like kind of the purest example of that. And I do love both sides of that. I'll read stat sheets and I'll watch games. So
Yeah, and it's such an interesting combo. And just to like, there recently something came out. I forget what company it was, but there's been a lot of talk now about like Big Brother style kind of monitoring and the measurements and all that. And so on the positive side in baseball, like everyone knows the Moneyball story from the Brad Pitt movie and the books, and how like stats were used to create this like composite team, getting specialists that were undervalued as a whole, but had like special, and then plugging them all together to fit like a bigger picture. What's on the flip side of that? What's like where maybe a baseball player that you followed that's like the stats just didn't tell the full story?
I think there are guys that the there's the thing there is hustle. There's a couple baseball players I can name. I don't think people would necessarily care about. Current Cubs second baseman Nico Horner and outfielder Pete Armstrong are like just two hustle guys. Like you see them run things out for the most part. You see them try for every ball. There was a great quote in basketball a couple of years ago. The Pacers lost in the championship. They have this sort of shorter guy on their team, TJ McCullough, and he's just like a hustle guy. Like he's obviously great at basketball, better than I could ever be or anyone I've ever met probably. But in the NBA, not a great player. But he just like he's just on the ball all the time. He's kind of that annoying, pesky fly for people that have the ball. And what captured me was he had a quote which he said, "Hustle is a skill. If it wasn't a skill, everyone would do it." And that was such an interesting way to phrase it. Of like, I always thought of it as a choice, right? You have a choice to do, but actually like turning that choice off in your brain and just doing it, that's the skill part. And I think for him and others, they can't avoid it, right? They just hustle as a default. They're not making a choice every time. And in fact, like making a choice is too much energy. So they've just made it the default. And stats are kind of tough to show up on that chart. Like you'll see a couple things that speak to that, but just running the ball out and doing those things might not make the sabermetrics, but can be really effective and certainly have their analogies to work in our lives. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great quote, and a good example of this. I can think of lots in the sports I follow. And so what we're talking about here is like there's an essence or like an intangible that cannot be measured. And so I think that's important to keep in mind when we're trying to evaluate programs as well, right? Because I'm going to come back
Yeah.
to that idea because I think let's go to your Coinbase story and just unpack that because it's a really good success story of like how you did intentionally from the beginning set it up so that you could measure impact, and then you had a great impact, and that obviously looked great for everyone involved. And then I want to come back to this idea of like, well, how do you tell the full story? Because the stats is just a part of it, right? But yeah, let's go back to Coinbase.
Yeah, totally. So I was this a few years back was running our a training program at Coinbase for our customer service agents. Coinbase gets a crazy volume of customer service requests. Really difficult questions. Really difficult questions. We have a lot of team based. We had a lot of team based in the Philippines and India. I don't know about now, but back then crypto was outlawed in those countries. They couldn't even access the Coinbase app. Actually, my first time ever using Figma was to mock up the Coinbase app so we could give them like a simulation platform of what the customers were seeing because we couldn't give them the real app. Um, and so, and customers are asking these really esoteric questions, not just about crypto, but about like US banking. And we realized we had to do more training on like automated clearinghouses and the way that US banking worked and really like in-depth stuff to kind of solve it. But um, our function was obsessed with first contact resolution, FCR, which is just what percentage of time are we solving the customer's question on that very first time? Doesn't require a follow up, or the follow up just saying thank you, and we can remove that from the data. Because we were so high volume, having this contact resolution just saved time, money, saved tickets from matriculating back in the queue. But it's very hard, like because people ask something, you often need more information to answer it. You need more context. How do you get like people were working on how do you get customers to provide that up front so we can unlock FCR. My part in training was, all right, well, what's the skill component of that? What's the behavior component of that? What's the approach component of that? And my team and I went back and we did our needs analysis and research both on the data side of, okay, what are we doing? Who's doing well on this? What are they doing? What issue types are we doing well on? Why? What can we see from sort of past tickets and then data of just percentages in our, business intelligence tool and Looker. And then we went to people, hey, you're doing really well. In fact, like pound for pound, ticket type for ticket type, you're doing better than your peers by 10%. How are you solving tickets better on this contact resolution? We got a bucket of behaviors and things. Key among them was just like reinforcing with the folks that like, hey, the business really cares about this. You're going to look better on the stat sheets. You would talk about like metrics if you improve your FCR. And so where you see opportunities, like take those. And 5%, so 5 out of 100 tickets, if you're able to do that, that's a big delta. That's good. That's really good. Like 5 of what you're usually getting. If you're getting 40, you're getting 60, whatever. But we're not getting 100. So, and we're getting maybe around 50, sometimes less, sometimes more. So 5 is a big deal. Try that, isolate that. Then here are ticket types and approaches and high volume ones that you can do, and ran this whole training. We did a half day training, 4 hours, some e-learnings, application, live simulation labs, practice tickets, all this stuff. And we set up with our analytics team, but I was able to do some of this too. From my background, real measurement on before isolating for issue types and then after isolating for issue types on their percent of first contact resolution. We did A/B tests with different groups where we isolated, but before and after to me in that where you're doing behavior change, if you can do that, isolation is more powerful because A/B groups are never quite the same. So I like before and after, and we had to do some customized Python of piping in when people's training day was to get their true before and after because we did it on a rolling basis and we had to train thousands of people. But we were able to show a really massive delta. 7%, 7 percentage points in some cases. Generally, I think we averaged around 5 or 6. Again, that 5 out of 100. And we had a calculator with our analytics team of if we know how much every ticket costs or every reply, we can say every non-FCR, every time a customer has to write back in and we have to answer them, here's how much that costs us. You multiply total ticket volume by the 5% increase, take out that cost, and we wound up saving almost $800,000 yearly when you extrapolate that. Massive savings with a dollar amount. We didn't spend nearly that. We spent 50,000, and when we calculated people's times, and I'm throwing those numbers out, but that was months. Those numbers firmly to where we could sort of rely on them, but we really targeted like we know we're going to make an impact here once we saw the data. Let's put it in percentage points. Let's put it in dollars. Let's make sure we have the graphs right. We're comparing the right groups. Really sitting back and doing that and engaging analytics teams with it. But yeah, massive success, and happy to go into more of what we did there to drive it. But one of my best success stories on just a pure kind of metrics basis that I've ever really been able to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, almost 20x ROI on that, which is
Yeah.
crazy. I want to unpack a couple of things. So I love that you started with I call this bright spots analysis. So you found people who were doing this well already,
Mhm.
interviewed them. I mean, that's always the starting point I recommend.
Yep.
Um, and then you made very clear links between the behavior and the metric. And I think
Yep.
what's key wasn't just for the program design, but you made it explicit for the people in customer support, so they could go,
Definitely.
oh, if I do more of this thing in the thing in my control,
Yep.
that's going to lead to a lower or a higher, first contact rate.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's huge. I think people underestimate that, sort of making the implicit explicit for people.
Yes. I would like urge everybody to do that, right? And there's probably some times where that feels a little bit like cheating, right? You're like, hey, we're going to run this training. Here's what we want to do. We're going to measure it. Help us. But they still have to do the work, right? And there's lots of psychological effects here at play. There's something called the Hawthorne effect, which is just like anytime anyone knows they're being measured about anything, they do better at everything, basically. Um, but again, like where we started off, like this measurement is so hard. Like take the cheats, the little cheats when you can, right? Like again, you're not fabricating data. They still have to do the work, but you've just given them the psychological insight of, hey, I should do this because that's the thing I'm being measured on, and helping that sort of cause all around here.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think it puts us as L&D professionals in the seat that we are best, which is not telling people what to do, but rather pointing them in the right direction and then removing all the blockers, right? All
Yeah.
the enablement and all that becomes just, how do I make this easier for people who now know what they're supposed to do and are motivated to do it? And then the other piece that I actually want to just go a little bit deeper in is the control groups that you set up, because this is like, yeah, this holy grail idea of like A/B testing things. You can never isolate that enough to be able to like control for all the other variables. So tell me a little bit more about the before after groups. Like, how did you set that up? What's an example of that?
People love A/B groups. I think we've just picked up that parlance from
The marketers.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we think that's like group A, group B that are simultaneously existing. But when you get into those designs, like they can be anything. Group A could be 2016's graduating class, and group B could be 2026 graduating class. Like, yes, there are dynamic things that differ between those, and you want to isolate as much as you can. But if you're comparing like to like in a way, take the opportunity to do it. Like you're never gonna get the perfect, everything's perfectly the same about these two groups. So, and again, with people and this sort of ongoing time series of data that you have, I just think before and after is your group, is your AB group, right? And you need to say, this is what this person was doing before the intervention. This is what they're doing now. Same metric, isolating for same volume of tickets, if those affect things and things like that. And so again, we said like, here's all the before data. And then because it was a rolling basis, it made it a little bit more complicated. Like person A was trained February 2nd, person B was trained February 16th. So they're on a different before and after timeline. So what we did in our graph was there's a zero in the middle of the graph, and then there's negative weeks from intervention. So that's everybody's average accumulation before. And then there's weeks post intervention. And so everybody's on the same chart, but they might have had this at different times, right? And so your like 4 week out volume might grow as more people hit the 4 week post mark, right? It might be low at first. So you got to give it some time to accumulate enough data. But it wasn't like a time. I've shared this out in a few places, and I'm happy to share it if anybody asks me, but there wasn't a time series on the bottom. It was weeks before, weeks after. When we went to leadership, we gave them like, generally, here's the timeline on that. So it's not so abstract, but you really want to think about that visualization of how you set it up. And again, it's like pre-intervention, post-intervention is the best way to measure behavior change if you're able to isolate those things out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You're controlling for start date or intervention date, and then mapping everyone along that. So, and what did you learn from this? Like, what are you taking forward now into your work at Figma?
Well, the psychological parts, enormous. Tell people what you're trying to do as much as what you're trying to give them. Um, and I think we get really into this, like, learning objectives have to be like this and this. And sometimes I'm just like, look, my objective is to make you better at your job, and to make my training look like a success, or be a success that I can show. That's the objective. Like, let's just be real about that. I don't need to frame it in the, like, describe this and do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, so that's one thing. I think the before and after is something I've modeled quite a few times, where from the beginning and get go, I want to make this the thing, and deciding how many weeks pre, how many weeks post do we need. Kind of settled usually on like anywhere from 6 to 12, depending on how much volume you're going to get and see the behavior change. In these learning for support roles, where people are measured on all these different things, handle time, customer satisfaction, you have so much opportunity to measure. And again, back to what we said a little bit ago, a lot more people are going to be in this measurable state for what they're doing in their work soon. And so you guys, if you don't feel like you have this kind of level of granularity in your data, if you're listening to this, you will at some point soon. And you'll think about, before I ran an AI intervention, how much AI tooling were they using? After, how much AI tool were they using? How much were they doing this in meetings? How much were they doing that? What's the before and after, and do that. So psychology, and then sort of like just experiment design of how you set that up, and trying to have as much rigor there as you can when you can do it. And I think that's like back to that core question of, how do you do this thing when it's really hard? You got to find your hills, and you got to climb them as hard as they are. They're not in every training, and they don't come around that much. So when they come around, like, really, really take aim and try to do this the right way, buy a lot of credibility for the trainings that you can't measure as well, because those are two.
And on that point, how you've said this before, that you can't measure everything. You can't go into that level of rigor for everything. How do you decide when to go into that depth and when not to?
I think the first one is, like, if you have a measurable output, right? Like, that we are targeting something that I have at least some kind of measure on, and you could start that when you do your sort of needs analysis conversation. Somebody says, "Hey, this is a problem. How do you know?" Well, we're not doing this enough. Do you have that measured somewhere, binary or unstructured data, or any way? We'll continue to measure that afterward. And if you have historics and something that's going to be measured at some point in the future, hopefully like semi-ongoing, then you can start to put that rigor in place of, let's collect that before data and make sure we're getting the after data as closely as possible. But again, that's not every time, for sure. Like, half the time you're getting a training and someone's just like, I don't think this is happening enough. It's a vibe. And you're like, I'm not, can't put the rigor around a vibe unless you give me something. I can proxy it kind of through surveys, but it's not going to be the rigor. And so then, fine, let's do survey design. Let's look at survey results. Let's tee that up. That's fine. Yeah.
And if it is a vibe, then is it enough to go, well, if the vibe is coming from an important stakeholder and like there's conviction there, then that's worth following through on, I'm assuming.
Yeah, for sure. It's certainly not a no. I think if you have a chance to say, if that's your vibe, can you go one level deeper? Is it a vibe of every person, every team? Is it some team, some people? And then is there a correlative thing I can throw your vibe at, of like, oh, actually, on data I do have, like, they are not doing that as much as their peers. Let me look at that later. Let me attach something to a vibe, even if it's not the whole vibe at large. It's some piece of data that's contributing or correlative to it. So yeah, you take the vibe, you please your stakeholders, you run good training, you try to turn that vibe around, you try to ask them, like, what would you have to see to turn that vibe around, that perspective, and you run with that. But try to get something that goes a level deeper. And I think, like, I talk about survey design is like not doing it anonymously, so you can categorize things by region, by tenure, by team, by function, by org. And usually, like, when you ask for a vibe, there's variances in that vibe that you can maybe attach onto how those different categories are running, and then look at post. Did they change? Did we change, like, the variance within those categories at all?
Yeah, that's good advice. I love that question as well, by the way, of like, what would you need to see for that vibe to change? That's
Yeah,
a really good jump off point.
yeah,
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 yeah.
totally.
For folks listening now, because I think this has been really practical as well. It's like there's the let's say we start from the vibe, and you kind of now trying to triangulate some kind of proxy for things. You do your bright spot analysis, you link those behaviors to the metrics, you set up your before and afters. What pitfalls, what common mistakes do you see teams making that they should look out for if they're heading down this path?
Oh, okay. Um, I think one is trying to show success at all costs, or successes all the time. Um, if you are in a position long enough, you will ruin your brand by saying that everything you do worked. And I think we are like somewhat allergic to just saying this didn't work. And I get why. We if something didn't work and we did it for a while, we just lit some money on fire. And that's hard. You need to come into that conversation and say, this didn't work. Here's my hypothesis. Here's what I'd like to do to remedy that. And here's how I'm going to try and look, measure, even lie about that. But you have to have some way of knowing it didn't work and try to work on the remedy there.
There's an insecurity, right, that we all often have in this industry, and I think that's a big part of that, but then there's a permission that you're granting there as well, of like, I mean, basically, like reality, you can't be right all the time. So
Correct.
don't pretend like
Yes.
it's okay. It's actually more strategic to say like, hey, we didn't get that right, and here's what I learned.
Yeah, and like giving space to you as a vendor coming in is a much harder thing to say. Like, hey, like I know you brought me, it didn't work. I'm talking about much more of the internal. I'm working with the same leadership, and we're in an ongoing conversation about something, and I can say that and like forward us to like, all right, then the next thing we're going to do is try to remedy that. So that's one. Second is causation, right? Of just saying like directly, like my training did all of these things to all these people without recognizing all the other impacts. Key among them is managers, right? Like a person's manager is going to have more impact over time than any single training intervention that you're going to run. And have some changing opinions on managers' roles and all these things, but generally, like a manager is the biggest enabler of somebody's performance in roles. Your training intervention is going to have maybe a small impact and hopefully around a lot of people, or a small contained impact that that might grow over time, but in short time you're only going to measure a little bit. So don't take the we ran this, everything's fixed, I've made all these people perfect. That's a direct causation of what I did. It's use words like we're seeing correlation, we influenced this, we helped drive. And like hopefully what you're doing is bought in on these managers, and so it really is like driving together. We're just doing the formalized part of this, where managers are doing some kind of less formalized part of it, but in the same down the same road. So don't try to take the credit of driving people. We're much too fickle to do that. uh, and uh, and then the last one is like giving numbers that don't have context and learning people. This course was a 4.8 on like CSAT, and how much people liked it. And is that good? Is that not good? Is there an industry? Is there a common thing that we have? 4.8 sounds good, but if we're normally getting 5, then why that? And like, if we only had 5 people and four gave a 5 and one gave a 4, that just doesn't matter that much, right? And I think business people are fatigued by seeing something like that. So really try to think about what you can drive. And if it's 5 people, ask them something deeper than, did you enjoy this course? Did this course make you better at your job? Yes or no? You could say, okay, 80% of people said that. At least I can give them that context. So try to give your numbers context that matter to the people that see them.
Yeah, what I'll add on to that last one, if it is a smaller cohort size, is ask for the specific examples of how they've applied something in the
Yes,
training. You
definitely.
get such rich stories there, and often a story can lead the narrative that you then go to your leadership with, which you then, you've got whatever data you have to support that, but it's the story that will get remembered.
Totally agree, especially if that story starts with like the problem that they were stuck at or needed help solving. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So go collect those stories. Okay, so let's wrap it up then with a final thought. If folks listening to this don't have that grounding in, statistical, like an understanding of statistics or measurement, and want to get better at this, like what recommendations do you have other than following you, which we definitely recommend?
Yeah.
Where can folks go and brush up on this?
Yeah. Well, there's many great people to follow on LinkedIn that are not me that I would highly recommend following. Dr. Will Thalheimer, if that's how you say his name, Thalheimer, who wrote 2 books now about survey design and then surfacing survey design results or good, well-designed survey results to leadership. Follow him, get that book. It's a weirdly expensive book, but if you need a copy, I can lend anybody my copy or take some pictures. There's great online resources. Um, there's learning PhDs out there that are studying like how we actually look at the psychological changes that we've brought on by different learning. Follow them. So it's following experts for sure, and just like engaging in that conversation, even just reading it and seeing the comments where people like you, Andrew, might be like, "How are you doing that?" Or tell me more about this, and like they're engaging in the conversational part. Um, the second part is like is AI, and we don't, without getting in the rabbit hole, like these chatbots are trained on all of the research that people have done within the L&D space historically, including good survey design, including how to think about metrics and doing that, and go chat with them and say, I'm designing this training. Here's the basics. If you feel comfortable enough, here's all of the content that I can dump into this chat. What would be 3 like rich survey questions I can ask? When you get the results back, you can say, hey, analyze this for me as the trainer, and then give me a quick analysis for my CEO or my manager, or my director. Like, and like, please don't just like take that and rip that and run with it. Like, look at what it gave you, right? And like, what about that framing did you already have in mind? Then you might be more advanced than you think you are in this. What seems new there? You can ask it questions. You can bring it onto LinkedIn. You can message me. Like, but they are really a rich ground to stimulate that, like, I don't know if I'm getting this right kind of thing. And there's no downside to chatting with this thing to see what surfaces for me. So yeah, like I dump data into these things, not really like learning data at my job, but sometimes with our tools that we have here. But they're wonderful. They're wonderful at showing you like different ways of cutting, slicing, looking at data, and then packaging things up for different audiences. And they're trained on the best research there is. So like, don't be afraid to use those.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great advice, and I'll piggyback on that to say, if you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, take the transcript of this conversation, chuck it into to your favorite AI, and get like a playbook from this, and go and follow the steps. Yeah.
Can I end on one thing, Andrew?
Yeah, please, of course.
I've been thinking about this a lot, and some of the training you're doing. This will be a little bit of a pivot, but formalizing out a thought in my mind that at some point I'll write down. But I was thinking about your work with ICs, and I'm a people manager here. I try to do a lot of work myself. I'm really like into this AI thing and what I can do with it. But in my career so far, this is by far the most exciting time to be an IC, and the worst time to be a manager. And I think like we've put so much effort because managers have been this enormous enabler of performance before. We've put so much learning effort into leadership development, manager feedback, manager development. And now it's like, man, if we can get ICs to really think about ways to automate their work, integrate with AI, boost their productivity, like that is now the biggest enabler. Managers are no longer it. And as a manager, like all the time I spend in meetings trying to contextualize things that are moving too fast feel like wasted. Like they feel like a liability. They feel like a risk of me not building something in that. So I was thinking about like the pace we're moving and all the work we're doing, what I see can do, and the work you're centering on of like their storytelling, their contextualizing. And I just think it's going to be more crucial than ever. So excited to keep building on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for, that's a perfect way to end. I'm going to call it here, but yeah. I think I would love to do a round 2 on that, because it's something, because I think there's a convergence of the skills needed to manage and the skills needed to be an IC now in AI, in a world of AI. And I think that's a fascinating topic to dig into. Yeah, the rare data person who could tell a story. Eric, you've proven it again. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Andrew. The blast.